Hi, everybody. Dennis Prager here. And I just realized I said hello, everybody, which is my norm. But I should also say ladies and gentlemen, and even boys and girls, because I just have to undo the damage of all of those woke organizations like Delta Airlines that won't say ladies and gentlemen anymore because they have so many non-binary passengers flying Delta these days. The number of passengers who neither identify as male or female is as close to zero as you can get, but they're willing to drop ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, I got that out of my system. Hi, everybody. So, unfortunately, we had another assassination attempt on a former president of the United States. I have so many thoughts, but I'm not going to dwell on this at length. But I do have a lot of thoughts. One of them is not directly about that. I will directly address that. But it is to those of you who are young. And by young, in this case, I would say under 30, I guess. Just as to take one arbitrary number. Your America is very different from the America I grew up in. I'm sure I've noted that on a number of occasions. It's worth noting again. I did live through, when I was a very young child, I lived through the Kennedy assassination, and that was awful. I will acknowledge that. And then, of course, Robert F. Kennedy, and then Martin Luther King. So it's not like my under 30 was pain-free and problem-free. I'm talking macro, not my own personal life, which generally was a blessing. But nevertheless, there is a level of division and tension and breakdown of norms in America today that I did not experience then. I mean, one of the most obvious, because that's why I come back to this subject so often, because it's so problematic that you are told that a boy can become a girl can become a boy, that there are any number of people who are neither a boy nor a girl nor a man nor a woman, but I don't know what the Facebook current was, but a few years ago there were 52 choices on your gender. And it's all made up terms. They made no sense. There's a chaos. That's the word. I grew up with tragedy like those assassinations and the Vietnam War, but there wasn't chaos. There was a sense that, basically speaking, well, nothing applies to everyone. Generally speaking, you grew up in a pretty normal environment. You had friends. You sort of respected your teachers. And you would get a little older and you'd find somebody to marry. You would marry. You'd make a family. I mean, this was the norm. I grew up when one of the most popular television shows was called Father Knows Best. I mean, if somebody tried to make that today, they might be arrested under charges of sexism. Father Knows Best. My God, that's absurd. By the way, they would not have any problem making a show today, Mother Knows Best. The only problem in making a show today, Mother Knows Best, is that so many women have chosen not to be mothers, that a serious percentage of younger Americans, by younger, I mean under 40, would not relate to it. So my point is there's a chaos. Good and evil are relative. Male and female are relative. Everything is up for grabs. Everything is your truth. I love that phrase, right? Your truth. But there's no such thing as your truth. There's truth and there's falsehood. And that's it. It's like there's no such thing as social justice. There's justice. The moment you add an adjective to the word justice, it's no longer justice. Because if it were justice, they wouldn't add an adjective. Environmental justice, social justice, racial justice, there's the number of adjectives, but there's justice, that's it. The moment you add an adjective, as I said, it's no longer about justice, it's about something else. So this is chaos. So that's my first reflection on the second attempt on the life of one of the two candidates for president of the United States, well, two major candidates. I mean, the two that matter, Republican and Democrat, obviously. There may be others, but that's remarkable. Or that candidate, a former president of the United States, has been arrested and convicted on nothing. It's nothing. These are things that we in America, for all of our history associated with corrupt dictatorships in other parts of the world, what we call third world dictatorships, arresting and on trumped up charges, because you could charge anyone with anything. There's an old saying in the law profession that you can indict a ham sandwich. And that's true, because you can indict. Indicting doesn't mean anything. You don't have to prove anything. You just have to make the case that the person should go on trial. So I reemphasize the chaos. I didn't add an obvious element of social rest and order that existed when I was a kid. And that is most Americans went to church on Sunday. Even if you're an atheist, you have to acknowledge that was a calming influence on a society. You don't have to be a believer in God. You don't have to be a believer in Christianity to acknowledge that was a good thing. People went to church on Sunday, and yes, they may not be that nice on Monday. I know this is the usual attack. Oh, it doesn't matter because they'll just do whatever they want on Monday. But it did matter. If you go to church on Sunday, you're less likely to do awful things on Monday. That's just a fact. There is a direct relationship between a church and synagogue attendance and behavior the rest of the week. And there's no guarantee. There are miserable people who go to church. There are wonderful people who don't. I know that. But it had an effect on society. Sunday was, when I was a really little kid, this stopped pretty early in my life, but I remember vividly. And I didn't grow up in rural America. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. But Sunday was so different from every other day of the week. It was just quiet. Today, it is impossible to know that it's Sunday. It's impossible. At least where I live, and I suspect it's true around America, anywhere in America, there is as much traffic on Sunday as on a weekday, on a work day. So you have inherited unrest, social unrest, psychological unrest. There are more depressed young women today than ever since they began measuring depression in young Americans. There are more depressed young women today. So this is not, I'm not conveying, oh, I feel bad for you, I feel sorry for you. I'm not into the pity game. I'm just into the realistic fact game. You're inheriting chaos. You're inheriting chaos with the budget of the United States of America. A country cannot sustain $35 trillion in debt. It cannot sustain it. At some point, this will cause a breakdown economically. And yet, of course, young people vote for the party that wants to print more dollars. I can't think of a more self-destructive form of voting. So that's what I think when the second assassination attempt in 2 months on one of the two candidates for president. It's what is the antidote? I mean, how can you not be affected by this chaos? Well, one obvious answer is that your own personal life can't be chaos. That's the most obvious answer. So you would do all the things that I mentioned that were good for the whole society. You will do it for yourself. You will find somebody to marry. You will make a family. You will attend church or synagogue, even if you're not a believer. I know that sounds bizarre to people. It's like the only analogy I ever came up with, but I think it was a good one, is even if you're tone deaf, you should give your kid music lessons. The fact that you don't care for music, I'm thinking like classical music, should have no impact on whether you give your child a music lessons. The fact that I may not relate to something doesn't mean I should abstain from it. You see, it's not like everything is subjective. Not everything is subjective. There are objectively good things for a person. So you have to cultivate stability in your own life. You need friends. It's critical to have friends. This is true at all ages. There is so much loneliness in the Western world that the UK, United Kingdom, Great Britain has had, I don't know if they still do, but I know they had a cabinet position, a minister of loneliness. I mean, is that unbelievable? Nobody thought of a minister of loneliness or a secretary of loneliness when I was a kid. The loneliness has always existed, but not nearly in the numbers today, and that includes young people. You would limit your use of that phone. I was a few months ago. Well, I'm at the airport all the time. I'll be at the airport right after this podcast. But on one of my many trips to the airport a few months ago, there was a group of kids. I think they were either high school or college age. Not easy for me to tell. And I think I got a picture of them. It was important to me to take this photo. There were about 10 of them, obviously traveling together. Not one was talking to another one. Every single one was on his or her cell phone. That's not good. That breeds loneliness. That breeds chaos. And I'm not a fanatic. I text. I love texting. I think it's a great thing. But it's not all I do. or check my phone constantly. In fact, if nothing came through, I'm a happier man. So the antidote to the chaos of society must be order in your own life. And then you could have inner peace, because there's not much outer peace. So to the assassination attempt in and of itself, I will only say that it is disconcerting that anyone would know where a former president and the current candidate for president would be at that moment. And even if he was waiting for hours, the fact that he knew he would be there at all, it does suggest that he was informed. I hope he wasn't, but I can't think of another explanation. And if that's true, that's very worrying. That's very disconcerting. So it's a difficult time we live in. But I do want to remind you of one thing, and then I'll take your questions. it's hard to find a time that wasn't difficult. I don't remember if it's Jeremiah, but I think it is. So there is a line among the prophets, and it's Shalom, Shalom, ve'ein Shalom. Or it's either in the prophets itself or it's based on the prophets. And I rarely quote the Hebrew because it sounds like I'm showing off, and I have no interest in doing that. But the phrase is good. Shalom, Shalom, ve'ein Shalom. Most people know the word shalom means peace. So it's peace, peace. That's how you say hello in Hebrew, basically. Peace, or which we translate often as hello. Shalom, shalom, ve'ein shalom. Everybody says shalom, but there isn't any shalom. So that's a long time ago that phrase came up. You know, think of World War I, World War II, the Holocaust, what happened to the Ukrainians, the Gulag, the 60 million Chinese. The human condition is a troubled condition. One of the reasons I so have loved living in America is that I was so aware all of my life at the horrors that existed in history. And I mean, I don't mean ancient history. I mean history right before I was born. The Holocaust was right before I was born. And World War II was. And, you know, my grandparents lived through World War I. And there were so many horrors in history. And the Great Plague, which wiped out, a third of Europe? Maybe more than a third of Europe. So I knew how lucky I was to be living in a place like the United States. And by the way, it would be true if you grew up in Sweden too. It's not just the United States, but this is where I grew up. And yet there were so many of my peers who started the ball rolling about this like of America. When I was at Columbia University, the student demonstrators spelled America with a K, as if it were the German spelling to make believe America was fascist. This is when I grew up. This is the 70s. They didn't realize how good they had it in this country. And a lot of people don't realize it. So I'll end with the great line of one of my sons, my son who had been addicted for much of his life and has been sober, now married with a kid coming. And he was on a Fireside chat. You should really watch the Fireside chat with my son. You'll be very, very moved. He said something that I have quoted probably 100 times since, in every context, because it's applicable to everybody. I asked him, when did you hit bottom? Because the theory is you don't get sober till you hit bottom. And hopefully you survive hitting bottom. So I said, when did you hit bottom? He said, when I ran out of people to blame for my problems. And I thought, oh my God, what a great line. Everybody should adopt that. That's when you'll get better. When you stop blaming everybody or anybody for your problems. One of the reasons I have such dislike for the left, I don't mean liberals, I mean the left, is they have cultivated the belief that everybody has somebody to blame for their problems. If you're black and you have problems, it's whites. If you're a woman, you have problems, it's men. You're Hispanic, you have problems, it's Anglos. You're gay and you have problems, it's straights. Everybody has another, and if you're none of those, there's always your parents. There's a very convenient duo to blame for your problems. It's just, you can't grow up till you stop blaming others for your problems. That's just the way it is. All right, let's, I thought that would be brief. Every week I fool myself. I should stop that. The next time I say, I just have a couple of, I won't say that anymore. I have no idea how many words I'll have to say. All right, here we go to you.
Howdy. My name is Nathaniel Eisner, AFC. I live in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I am 34 years old, born again 29 years ago. I'm known as a Bible nerd. I vote straight ticket pro-life. And my question for Dennis Prager is, what does he think God's pure word is? The Masoretic Hebrew, the received Greek, the King James English, or something else? Thank you, and God bless.
Now, you got to admit, I get varied questions. Is that fair to say? What did he call himself? A religious nerd?
Bible nerd.
Bible nerd? That's great. He's a Bible nerd. Let's see, I got that right. All right, let's see. So what do I think God's pure word is? The Masoretic Hebrew. Masoretic Hebrew means the original Hebrew text as we have it for the Old Testament. Then there is the received Greek, that's the New Testament. King James English is the greatest English translation of the whole Bible, the Old and New Testaments, done by King James. I think was it the 16th century or the 17th century? I know somebody in the room knows the answer, and it's very painful. She should signal you. What's the answer? Is it 16th or 15th? 1500s. Is it all right, anyway, I think it's the 1600s. Anyway, it's a fantastic translation, what King James did. It would have to be the 1600s, because it was done by a Protestant. And so, yeah, it has to be the 1600s. Okay. Or something else. Thank you and God bless. By the way, it's a very funny thing in English, God bless. How come nobody says you? Isn't that interesting? They say God bless. I never understood that. By the way, I have a very nice answer. I get almost every day people come over to me. Literally, if I leave my house, it's every day. A restaurant, an airport, I don't know, some store, wherever it'll be. So I always get nice comments. All the hate against me is on the internet. But in face-to-face, it's almost always very loving. And they will frequently say, God bless you to me. Not God bless you. And I have a standard response. He has. And people are moved by that. But I mean that sincerely as well. Anyway, God's pure word, pure is an interesting adjective to have put there. Yes, but I believe, I'm a religious Jew, I believe in the Old Testament. I believe, it's a very complex question, but it's worthy of addressing briefly. I do believe that the first 5 books are singularly divine. And that, by the way, is a traditional Jewish view. The first 5 books, the Torah, because everything else is based on that. In the Old and New Testament, everything is based on the first 5 books. Without them, you don't have God creating the world. You don't have the Garden of Eden. You don't have Adam and Eve. You don't have the 10 Commandments. You don't have love your neighbor as yourself. It's all rooted. Everything else flows from those first 5 books. That's why I'm writing my commentary, 10 years of work thus far after a lifetime of teaching it. It's called the Rational Bible, and it really makes the case through reason for God and the Bible. But I think those 5 books are ultimately divine. I think there's inspiration, which is a common word used among Christians. It's a good word. I think there's divinely inspired. The only other thing I'd add is when God speaks to a prophet, when a prophet says, "Thus saith the Lord," I believe that God did speak to that prophet. So I don't know if that helps you, but that is my view. Clearly, God's pure word, it can't be King James. I mean, that's a translation. But it's not far. You can have I know the Hebrew. And I'm telling you, you can have a pretty good understanding using King James. That's true. Okay. So we have Prager United, and I remind you, go to PragerUnited.com, and you help everything stay free at PragerU, including the Fireside chat. And you get a lot of bonuses, including the first question after the video question. So here we go. Prager United member question. Joyce L., 33 years old, in Jacksonville, North Carolina. I didn't know there was a Jacksonville, North Carolina. People who, it's funny, I always think about this. People who live in a city by the name of a city that everybody knows in a different state. Everybody knows Jacksonville, Florida. So you spend your life correcting people. It's a burden. I mean, it's not a horrible burden, but I feel for you. Hi, Dennis. How can I honor my parents in this situation? Uh-oh. I am the only conservative in my family, and my mom especially very explicitly expresses that she did not raise me to be a wife and a mom. I'll come back to that. It is really tough to even be around her. She's always miserable. I'd love to hear your take. Thanks. I'll go from the end to the middle. I had no doubt she's miserable. Every poll, left, right, middle, acknowledges that the further left you go, the less happy you are. It makes perfect sense. It's such a dark view of the world. It makes perfect sense. But this is amazing that your mother would say to you, I didn't raise you to be a wife and mother. So what did your mother, I would like to ask your mother, what did you raise your daughter to be? Head of sales at a shoe store? Or shoe company, I should say, even? And by the way, that is a totally honorable thing to be the head of sales for a shoe dealer or whatever it might be. I don't knock that in the least. That was one of my dogs. That dog gets excited when I touch this subject. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, there he is. Yeah. Because he believes that my wife was raised to be his mother. See, that's the reason. So he walked out. He's the whole topic has really ruined his day. That's with the door closed? Okay. We'll wait for a moment, yeah. The thought that a mother would be disappointed, unhappy, angry that her daughter wanted to be a mother and wife, of course she's unhappy. It means that as a mother and wife that she has been, presumably, she was very, very, very unhappy. That's the only possible read here. But it sounds like the sort of person who would be unhappy, whatever she did. I mean, most parents ache to be grandparents. And I don't believe that that's the be-all and end-all of life. Even having children is not the be-all and end-all of life. But it's a big deal. And that she would not think, oh boy, am I lucky? My daughter wants to marry, unlike so many women in her generation, which is you. How old did you say here? What was it, 30? Let's see, yeah, 33. Wow. So anyway, your question was, how do you honor your parents in this situation? There are so many, I get this question probably more than any other single one because I'm adamant about honoring parents. It's in the 10 Commandments. And notice, and I got to make this point again, there's no biblical law to love your parents. Love the stranger, love your neighbor, love God, but you don't have to love your parents. That's brilliant of the Bible not to have demanded that, because that's impossible. Some people love their parents, some people don't, end of issue. But what does it mean to honor? Okay, so you don't gratuitously dishonor your mother. You don't have to go out of your way to be loving, but it at the very least you don't dishonor, so that whereas you might just dismiss any other adult who said, that's all you're going to be, a mother and a wife, and you think, what the hell's wrong with you? You wouldn't talk that way because it's your mother. You would disagree in a more respectful way. That would be an example of what you would do. But I feel for you, but the number of people with screwy parents is very high. It's the way it is. It's part of the human condition. But I admit I had never quite heard that. My mother, what is it? It's really explicitly expresses that she did not raise me to be a wife and a mom. Well, maybe if you can do this, why don't you send your mom all the studies not done by conservatives that women who have a family, who have or had a husband and has children, are happier. And the happiest have a husband and children. That they are overwhelmingly the happiest women. Just send her that. That's not disrespectful. Mom, I just thought you might find this study of interest. She won't find it of interest as it happens. She'll experience exponential bouts of anger, probably, but it doesn't matter. You're allowed to say what you think. Just do it in a respectful way. Is that our time? That's a bummer. The only way I realize now, the only way I can get to many questions if I devote the whole Fireside Chat to questions. So hopefully there won't be another assassination attempt in the next week. That was very dark humor, I have to admit, really dark. Then maybe that's what I'll do. In the meantime, it's wonderful to be with you, and I'll see you next week.